I'm Savannah Mitchell, 32, and I never thought I'd see my own brother try to destroy my life. The golden boy who had everything handed to him on a silver platter is now suing me for half of my $28 million inheritance money he never knew existed until 3 months ago. Who would have thought that the family secret my grandmother and I kept for over a decade would tear apart what little family I had left? Hey everyone. Before I dive into this absolutely wild family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. This story about family betrayal and revenge gets pretty intense, so if you enjoy stories about karma coming full circle, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this family revenge drama unfolds. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, my brother Ethan and I lived what appeared to be the same life on the surface, but the reality couldn't have been more different. Our parents, Richard and Eleanor Mitchell, ran a successful real estate development company that afforded our family a comfortable lifestyle in one of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods. From the outside, we seemed like the picture-perfect American family, beautiful colonial home with a manicured lawn, summer vacations to Europe, and private school education. But within our household, there was an unmistakable favorite, and it wasn't me. Ethan, 3 years, my senior, was the golden child from the moment he was born. He had our father's sharp features and confident demeanor, and more importantly, he shared Dad's passion for business and status. I, on the other hand, took after my mother's side of the family, more artistic, thoughtful, and, according to my father, impractical. The disparity in how we were treated wasn't subtle. When Ethan turned 16, he received a brand new BMW as a birthday present. My 16th birthday came and went with a modest gift card and a reminder that practical gifts build character. When college applications rolled around, my parents spared no expense for Ethan's education at Wharton Business School, the alma mater my father had always dreamed of for his son and heir to the family business. Meanwhile, I had to fight tooth and nail just to attend a state university for my art history degree, which my father referred to as my expensive hobby. Art won't pay the bills, Savannah, he would lecture me repeatedly. You need to think about your future more pragmatically. My saving grace during those years was my maternal grandmother, Vivian. Unlike my parents, Grandma Vivian celebrated my creative spirit and encouraged my passion for art and design. Her modest home in the suburbs became my sanctuary during the tension-filled weekends at home. While my parents attended Ethan's lacrosse games and business club competitions, I would escape to Grandma's house where we would visit art galleries, attend local theater productions, or simply sit in her garden discussing literature and philosophy. You have a beautiful mind, Savannah, she would tell me. Never let anyone dim your light. What nobody in our family knew was that Grandma Vivian wasn't just the retired high school English teacher everyone believed her to be. Her late husband, my grandfather, whom I never met, had made some incredibly shrewd investments in technology companies back in the 1970s and 80s, stocks that had multiplied in value thousands of times over the decades. She lived modestly, by choice, not necessity. The dynamics in our family grew even more pronounced after Ethan graduated with honors and joined our father's company. Business dinners and family gatherings became essentially networking opportunities for the two of them, with my mother playing the role of the supportive wife and hostess. I was merely background decoration, occasionally acknowledged when a client or business partner asked about the other Mitchell child. After college, I struggled to find steady work in the art world. The 2008 recession had hit the industry hard, and entry-level positions were scarce. When I asked my father for a temporary position at his company until I found something in my field, his response was cutting. The Mitchell Development Group isn't a charity, Savannah. We have standards to maintain. Ethan, sitting across from me at the dinner table, had the audacity to add, "Maybe this is the wake-up call you need, sis. Art was never going to work out anyway." The condescension in his voice made my blood boil, but I held my tongue. This was the dynamic I had grown accustomed to Ethan being built up while I was torn down. Our mother, as usual, remained silent, offering only a sympathetic glance when my father wasn't looking. It was during this low point that Grandma Vivian invited me to her house for tea one Sunday afternoon. I arrived to find not just tea, but also her lawyer, Mr. Abernathy. What transpired that day would forever alter the course of my life, and unknowingly at the time, set in motion a family drama that would expose the true colors of everyone around me. Savannah Grandma Vivian said, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief I'd never seen before. "There's something important I need to share with you. Something that must remain between us for now." Little did I know that this secret would eventually shatter the fragile facade of family loyalty we had maintained for years and reveal just how deep my brother's sense of entitlement truly ran. That Sunday afternoon at Grandma Vivian's house changed everything. The delicate china teacups sat untouched on the coffee table as Mr. Abernathy, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver-rimmed glasses, opened his leather briefcase. Savannah Grandma Vivian began reaching for my hand. "What I'm about to tell you might come as a shock, but I've made this decision after years of careful consideration." Mr. Abernathy placed a thick folder on the table. "Your grandmother has named you as the primary beneficiary of her estate," he explained in his measured professional tone. "And it's important that you understand the extent of what that means." The numbers on the documents before me seemed surreal investments in Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon dating back decades, real estate holdings across 3 states, and various other assets, totaling just over $25 million. I don't understand," I stammered, looking up at my grandmother in disbelief. "Everyone thinks you live on your teacher's pension." Grandma Vivian's smile was both sad and knowing. "Your grandfather was brilliant with money, dear. He saw the future before most people did. We decided long ago to live simply, not because we needed to, but because we wanted to. Wealth shouldn't define a person's worth." "But what about Mom and Dad and Ethan?" I asked, still struggling to process what I was seeing. Grandma Vivian's expression hardened slightly, a rare look for her usually gentle face. "Your mother will receive a reasonable sum, but I've watched how your father and brother operate for years. The way they value money over people, status over character." She squeezed my hand tighter. "And I've seen how they've treated you." Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hamilton has structured this inheritance with specific conditions. For now, this arrangement remains confidential. Your grandmother will maintain control of her assets until she passes, at which point everything will transfer to a trust in your name." "But why the secrecy?" I asked. Because Grandma Vivian said, her voice suddenly weary. "I've seen what money does to people, especially people like your father and brother. If they knew, they would never treat you the same again. And I want you to have a chance to establish yourself on your own terms, without their interference or sudden interest." Over the next 5 years, Grandma Vivian became not just my emotional support, but my financial mentor as well. While maintaining our secret, she taught me about investment strategies, wealth management, and philanthropy. We would meet regularly with Mr. Abernathy and her financial advisors, preparing me for the responsibility that would someday be mine. During this time, I managed to secure a position at a small but prestigious art gallery in Seattle, putting some distance between myself and my family in Portland. The physical separation helped, but family gatherings remained tense exercises in restraint. Ethan had been made junior partner at my father's company and never missed an opportunity to highlight the contrast in our career trajectories. "The gallery business still keeping the lights on, Savannah?" he would ask with that familiar, condescending smile at holiday dinners. "Dad and I just closed the Westridge development deal. 8 figures. He would wink at our father, who would beam with pride. I would simply smile and change the subject, the weight of our shared secret with Grandma Vivian both empowering and isolating. When Grandma Vivian was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the prognosis was grim, 3 to 6 months. I immediately took a leave of absence from the gallery and moved back to Portland to care for her. My mother helped when she could, but my father and Ethan were too busy with an important development project to offer more than occasional brief visits. They always were too busy for what truly matters, Grandma Vivian observed one evening as I adjusted her pillows. She wasn't bitter, just stating a fact. 2 months after her diagnosis, on a rainy April morning, Grandma Vivian passed peacefully in her sleep with me holding her hand. The loss was devastating. She hadn't just been my grandmother. She had been my ally, my mentor, and the only person in my family who truly saw me. The funeral was a somber affair, attended by her former colleagues, students, and our relatively small extended family. My father managed to look appropriately mournful, and Ethan even put his phone away for most of the service. Neither had any idea what would come next. 1 week after the funeral, Mr. Abernathy called a family meeting at his downtown office. My mother assumed it was a standard reading of a modest will. My father and Ethan attended more out of obligation than interest. The spacious conference room fell completely silent when Mr. Abernathy revealed the true extent of Grandma Vivian's estate, and the fact that I was to inherit the vast majority of it, now grown to $28 million, through careful management and market gains. My father's face flushed crimson. "This is some kind of mistake," he sputtered, looking at the lawyer, then at me. "Vivian was a school teacher. This doesn't make any sense." "There is no mistake, Mr. Mitchell," Mr. Abernathy replied calmly. "Mrs. Hamilton's financial affairs were meticulously managed for decades. Savannah has been prepared for this inheritance for the past 5 years." "5 years," my mother gasped, turning to me with hurt in her eyes. "You've known about this for 5 years and never said anything." Before I could respond, Ethan slammed his fist on the conference table. "This is bullshit," he shouted, glaring at me with an intensity that made me flinch. "She manipulated Grandma. This should be split equally among the family. Ethan, please," my mother pleaded. But my brother was already on his feet, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "You've always been jealous of me, of what I've accomplished. And now you've somehow swindled your way into this." I felt a strange calm wash over me as I faced my brother's rage. For the first time in my life, the power dynamic between us had shifted, and neither of us quite knew how to navigate this new reality. What I didn't realize in that moment was that this revelation would unleash a side of my brother I had never seen before, a vindictive, entitled fury that would stop at nothing to claim what he believed should rightfully be his. The conference room at Mr. Abernathy's office became a battlefield that day. After Ethan's outburst, my father quickly joined the offensive, his business instincts kicking in as he began questioning the legality of Grandma Vivian's will. "There must be some stipulation about direct descendants," he argued, his lawyer voice emerging. Though he developed real estate, he'd started his career in corporate law. "Eleanor is Vivian's daughter. Surely she has primary rights to the inheritance." Mr. Abernathy maintained his professional composure. "The will is ironclad, Mr. Mitchell. Mrs. Hamilton worked with me for over 15 years to ensure her wishes would be carried out exactly as stated. Miss Mitchell's inheritance is legally sound, and contestation would be both costly and futile." My mother sat quietly, her expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was hurt by her mother's decision or simply processing the shocking revelation about our family's financial reality. As we left the meeting, Ethan grabbed my arm in the parking garage, his grip tight enough to leave marks. "This isn't over, Savannah," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "You think you can just swoop in and take what should belong to all of us? You have no idea what you've started." I pulled my arm away. "Ethan, Grandma made this decision. This wasn't my doing." Bullshit, he spat. You were always playing the victim, weren't you? Poor little Savannah, so neglected while Big Brother got all the attention. Well, now we see what you were really doing all those afternoons at Grandma's manipulating an old woman. His words stung, but I held my ground. That's not what happened. If you'd ever bothered to actually spend time with her beyond obligatory holiday visits, save it, he cut me off. I'm not letting you get away with this. Not a chance in hell. I drove home that day with a gnawing feeling in my stomach. The brother I'd grown up with, competitive and favored as he was, had transformed into something darker before my eyes. The next morning, I woke to a barrage of text messages from extended family members and even some old mutual friends. Apparently, Ethan had spent the night calling and emailing everyone in our social circle, spinning a tale about how I had isolated Grandma Vivian in her final years, manipulated her into changing her will, and potentially even hastened her death to secure my inheritance. Is it true you wouldn't let anyone visit her without your supervision? Texted my cousin Megan. Ethan says you fired Grandma's longtime nurse and replaced her with someone who reported only to you, wrote my aunt. The accusations were not just hurtful, they were vicious fabrications designed to paint me as a calculating predator rather than the granddaughter who had actually been there during Grandma Vivian's final days. I called my mother, hoping she might help set the record straight, but her response was tepid at best. You have to understand, Savannah, this has been quite a shock for everyone, she said carefully. Your father and Ethan feel betrayed. Betrayed, Mom. I spent the last 3 months caring for Grandma while they couldn't be bothered to visit more than twice. A heavy sigh came through the phone. I know, honey. But $28 million, that's life-changing money. Money that could have helped the whole family. Her response made it clear she wasn't going to stand up for me. The allegiance to my father and brother, the family breadwinners, was too deeply ingrained. The character assassination campaign was just Ethan's opening move. 3 days later, I received an official letter from Preston and Warwick, one of Portland's most aggressive law firms. Ethan was formally contesting the will, claiming that Grandma Vivian had been unduly influenced and wasn't of sound mind when she made her estate plans. When I called Mr. Abernathy in a panic, his voice remained steady and reassuring. This is unfortunately common with large inheritances. Savannah, your grandmother anticipated this possibility, which is why we have years of documentation, medical evaluations confirming her mental competence, witnesses to her decision-making process, and recorded meetings discussing her estate planning. This challenge won't stand up in court. Despite his confidence, the legal proceedings would take time, and Ethan knew it. This wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about dragging my name through the mud and making the inheritance as painful as possible for me. The situation escalated when my position at the Seattle Gallery suddenly came under threat. The owner, Marcus, called me into his office one afternoon with an unusually serious expression. Savannah, I've received some concerning information about you, he began awkwardly. Someone claiming to be a family friend reached out to me and some of our major clients with allegations about your grandmother's estate. My heart sank. Let me guess, my brother Marcus nodded uncomfortably. He didn't identify himself as such, but it seemed personal. He's contacted several of our collectors suggesting that you're unstable and untrustworthy. I know it's probably nonsense, but it's creating uncomfortable questions. The gallery operated on relationships and trust. Even unfounded rumors could be devastating in such a close-knit community. I'd never ask you to leave over unsubstantiated claims, Marcus continued. But perhaps a leave of absence until this blows over might be best for everyone. Just like that, the career I'd worked so hard to build was in jeopardy. Not because of any failing on my part, but because my brother was determined to punish me for an inheritance I never asked for. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment contemplating the wreckage Ethan was creating in my life, I received a text message from him that chilled me to the bone. Ready to negotiate, yet this is just the beginning, Savannah. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd never heard of Grandma's money. 50/50 split is my only offer. Think about it. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just family drama, it was psychological warfare. And my brother, with his business acumen and social connections, had decided to use every weapon at his disposal to break me down. But something shifted inside me as I read his threatening message. The hurt and shock began to crystallize into something harder: determination. If Ethan wanted war, he would get one, but it wouldn't be fought on his terms, and he had severely underestimated what I had learned from Grandma Vivian beyond just financial management. I had also learned about justice, patience, and the power of truth, and I was about to put those lessons to very good use. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt since before Grandma Vivian's diagnosis. Ethan's text message still burned in my mind, but instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of purpose. I had spent my entire life being underestimated by my family, particularly by Ethan and my father. Perhaps that would finally work to my advantage. First, I called Mr. Abernathy. I need everything I told him. Every document, every record of Grandma's decision-making process, every medical evaluation. And I need to understand exactly what resources I have access to right now, even with the will being contested. The trust was structured with litigation protection in mind, Mr. Abernathy explained. You have access to a predetermined portion, approximately $3 million for legal fees and living expenses during any potential challenges. Your grandmother was quite thorough in her preparations. Even in death, Grandma Vivian was looking out for me. The thought brought both comfort and renewed determination. My next call was to Diane Winters, a former classmate from university who had become a respected investigative journalist. We hadn't spoken in years, but Grandma Vivian had taught me the value of maintaining connections, even distant ones. Diane, it's Savannah Mitchell. I have a situation that might interest you professionally. Over coffee at a quiet cafe far from any of my family's usual haunts, I laid out the entire story for Diane. Grandma Vivian's secret wealth, my brother's campaign of character assassination, and the legal battle brewing over the inheritance. That's certainly compelling, Diane said, tapping her pen against her notebook. But what's the angle here? Rich families fighting over money isn't exactly breaking news. The angle, I replied, is what this reveals about the Mitchell Development Group. My father and brother have built their reputation on being pillars of the Portland business community, ethical developers who revitalize neighborhoods. But I've watched from the inside as they've cut corners, manipulated zoning regulations, and silenced opposition. Diane's eyebrows shot up. You have evidence of this. Grandma Vivian taught me to pay attention and keep records. I have emails, conversations, I've documented photos of project sites where environmental regulations were ignored. I was always the wallpaper in the room during business discussions, present but invisible to them. And you're willing to go public with this, against your own family. I took a deep breath. I never wanted their money, Diane. I just wanted their respect. But they're trying to destroy my life because they can't stand the idea that Grandma saw value in me that they missed. So yes, I'm ready. Over the next week, I worked with Diane to compile a comprehensive dossier on the Mitchell Development Group's more questionable business practices. Meanwhile, I hired Patricia Zhang, a formidable attorney known for her expertise in both estate law and defamation cases. If Ethan wanted to play hardball, I needed someone who could match his aggression with legal precision. We'll file a countersuit for defamation, Patricia advised during our first meeting. Your brother's campaign to damage your professional reputation crosses several legal lines. Additionally, we'll seek a temporary restraining order preventing him from contacting your professional associates. The legal machinery began turning, but I knew courtroom battles would be lengthy. I needed to address the immediate damage to my reputation and career. With Marcus's reluctant permission, I took a leave of absence from the gallery. However, instead of retreating as Ethan probably expected, I leveraged Grandma Vivian's connections in the art world connections I had nurtured during our time together. Within 2 weeks, I had secured a consulting position with the Portland Museum of Modern Art, curating a special exhibition focused on emerging Pacific Northwest artists. The announcement of my new role made the local arts section complete with a photograph of me standing beside the museum director. The morning after publication, I received another text from Ethan, playing high-profile curator with Grandma's stolen money. Not a smart move. People are starting to talk about where your sudden expertise came from. I didn't respond. Let him think his intimidation was working. Hey, everyone. I know this family drama is getting intense, and we're just getting to the turning point. This is where everything starts to change. Are you Team Savannah or Team Ethan right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you're enjoying this wild ride of family betrayal and want to see justice served, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. The revenge that's coming will absolutely blow your mind. Behind the scenes, Diane's investigation was gaining momentum. She had connected with former contractors who had worked with the Mitchell Development Group and were willing to speak about their experiences, many of them negative. Environmental impact shortcuts pressure to ignore building code violations and aggressive tactics against community opposition were emerging as patterns. 3 weeks after our initial meeting, Diane called me late one evening. I found something big, she said, her voice charged with the excitement that only journalists get when uncovering a significant story. The Westridge development, the one your brother was bragging about at family dinners. There's evidence they knowingly built on contaminated soil and falsified environmental reports. My stomach tightened. The West Ridge development was Ethan's first major project as junior partner, his pride and joy. It was also an upscale residential community where several prominent Portland families had already purchased homes. Are you certain? I asked. I have copies of the original environmental assessment that was buried and testimony from the engineer who was fired after raising concerns, Diane confirmed. This isn't just unethical, Savannah. It's potentially criminal. People are living on that land. The revelation left me in a moral quandary. Exposing this would devastate not just Ethan and my father, but potentially innocent homeowners who might find their investments worthless overnight. Yet covering up a health hazard wasn't an option either. After a sleepless night, I made my decision. The next morning, I contacted Patricia to ensure we proceeded legally, then arranged a meeting with Diane, Mr. Abernathy, and a trusted environmental law specialist. We need to approach this carefully, I insisted. My priority isn't revenge, it's ensuring the residents are protected and that the contamination is addressed. We developed a strategy. Diane would prepare her exposé but delay publication while we confidentially contacted state environmental regulators. This would give authorities time to confirm the contamination and develop a remediation plan before public panic ensued. Then came the most difficult decision: whether to warn my family before everything broke. Despite everything, these were still the people I'd grown up with. My mother at least deserved some warning. I invited her to lunch at a quiet restaurant across town. She arrived looking tired, the strain of the family conflict evident in the new lines around her eyes. "Mom," I began after we had ordered, "there's something you need to know. It's about the Westridge development." She listened in stunned silence as I outlined what Diane had discovered, her face growing paler by the minute. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because despite everything, you're my mother. And I wanted to give you a chance to prepare." She shook her head slowly. "Your father and Ethan will be ruined if this comes out." "They made their choices," I replied gently. But more importantly, families are living on contaminated land, Mom. Children. This isn't about our family drama anymore. For the first time in my memory, my mother looked at me not with disappointment or mild concern, but with something approaching respect. "What are you planning to do?" she asked. "The right thing," I answered simply, which is what Grandma Vivian taught me to do, even when it's difficult. As I drove home from that lunch, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was Marcus from the gallery. "Savannah, I've been getting some strange calls. Someone claiming to be from a regulatory agency asking about financial arrangements between you and the gallery, suggesting there might have been impropriety." My heart sank. Ethan was escalating now, potentially fabricating legal issues. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. My brother is." "I know exactly what your brother is doing," Marcus interrupted, surprising me. "And I want you to know I'm not intimidated. In fact, I've spoken with several other gallery owners who've received similar calls. We're standing together on this." His support brought unexpected tears to my eyes. For so long, I had fought my battles alone, convinced that Ethan's charm and my father's influence would always win out in social circles. But perhaps I had built more genuine relationships than I realized. That night, I received an email from Patricia with a draft of our legal counteroffensive. Not just the defamation suit against Ethan, but a comprehensive response to his challenge of the will that included detailed documentation of Grandma Vivian's mental competence and deliberate estate planning. As I reviewed the documents, a notification popped up on my phone, a voicemail from Ethan. With hesitation, I played it. "You think you're so clever with your museum job and your lunch with Mom." His voice was slurred, suggesting he'd been drinking. "But I know things about you too, Savannah. Things from college that would shock your fancy art world friends. Back down now, or everything comes out." The threat was clear, but his desperation was clearer. I saved the voicemail as evidence and forwarded it to Patricia. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I allowed myself to cry. Not from fear or hurt, but from the sheer exhaustion of fighting someone I had once looked up to despite everything. The brother who had taught me to ride a bike before he became too cool to be seen with his little sister. The brother who had in rare, unguarded moments shown glimpses of genuine care. But as the tears subsided, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about truth, justice, and standing up for what was right. Ethan had chosen his path long ago, prioritizing status and wealth over family and integrity. Now we would both face the consequences of our choices. The next day, with Patricia's legal documents filed and the environmental regulators quietly beginning their investigation, I made one final move. I penned a letter to Ethan, not an email or text that could be easily forwarded or screenshotted, but an actual handwritten letter, just as Grandma Vivian had taught me for important communications. "Ethan," I wrote, "this has gone far enough. I never wanted this war between us, and I certainly never schemed for Grandma's inheritance. She made her choice based on values that she held dear, values about how wealth should be used and how people should be treated. I'm offering you one chance to step back from this destructive path. Drop the legal challenge, end the smear campaign, and I will ensure that the Westridge situation is handled with maximum discretion and minimum public damage to your reputation. This is not a negotiation for the inheritance that will remain as Grandma intended, but an opportunity to salvage what remains of our family and your future. You have until Friday to decide." I signed it simply Savannah, and had it delivered to his office by courier signature required. Friday was now just 2 days away, and the wheels I had set in motion could no longer be easily stopped. Whatever Ethan decided, the coming days would irreversibly change our family forever. Friday came with no response from Ethan. I hadn't really expected one. His pride had always been his defining characteristic, even more than his ambition. As the deadline passed, I gave Diane the green light to move forward with her investigation, and Patricia proceeded with our legal countermeasures. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly everything would unravel once the first thread was pulled. Monday morning brought the first bombshell. The Oregon Department of Environmental Quality announced a formal investigation into the Westridge development, triggering an immediate halt on all pending home sales in the community. By noon, local news stations were reporting that soil samples had preliminarily tested positive for concerning levels of industrial chemicals linked to the property's previous use as a manufacturing site. My phone rang just after the evening news broadcast the story. It was my father. "What have you done?" His voice was deadly quiet, more frightening than if he'd been yelling. "I didn't do anything, Dad. The contamination at Westridge was your company's doing. Don't play innocent with me," he hissed. "This investigation coming right in the middle of your inheritance dispute. You think I can't connect those dots?" "The timing is unfortunate," I acknowledged, maintaining my composure. "But the fact remains that Ethan pushed forward with development despite knowing the environmental risks. People's health is at stake. You ungrateful." He cut himself off. "Do you have any idea what this will do to the company? To our family name? I think the better question is whether you and Ethan cared what building on toxic land would do to the families who trusted you with their life savings and their children's safety." The line went silent for several seconds. Then, with cold precision, he said, "You're no longer my daughter," and hung up. Despite anticipating his reaction, his words cut deep. I sat motionless in my apartment, phone still in hand, as tears slid silently down my cheeks. For all the years of feeling less than in his eyes, I had never imagined a complete severance. It was simultaneously painful and oddly freeing. The next day brought Diane's full investigative piece in the Portland Chronicle. The article was meticulous, focusing primarily on the environmental violations and regulatory failures, with only brief mention of the concurrent inheritance dispute as context for how the information came to light. Nevertheless, the connection was there for anyone paying attention. What I hadn't expected was the public reaction. Rather than being vilified as the vengeful daughter, I began receiving messages of support from environmental activists, former Mitchell Development Group employees, and even some Westridge homeowners grateful that the contamination had been exposed before more families moved in. "Thank you for your courage," wrote one young mother who had been weeks away from closing on a Westridge home. "You may have saved my children from serious health issues." The Mitchell Development Group's stock plummeted. Investors pulled out of ongoing projects. Home buyers filed a class action lawsuit. The carefully crafted reputation my father and brother had built over years crumbled in a matter of days. Through it all, I maintained public silence, focusing instead on my work at the museum and the ongoing legal battle over the inheritance. Mr. Abernathy assured me that Ethan's challenge to the will was weakening in court, especially as questions about his business ethics emerged. Then came the ambush I should have seen coming. I was leaving the museum one evening when a reporter from a local television station approached me with a microphone camera crew in tow. "Miss Mitchell care to comment on allegations that you sabotaged your family's company out of revenge for childhood neglect?" Before I could respond, she continued, "We have an exclusive interview with your brother Ethan Mitchell, who claims you've had a lifelong vendetta against him and your father, culminating in this orchestrated attack on their business." My stomach dropped. So Ethan had decided to take this public in a different way, painting himself as the victim of a jealous sister's revenge plot. I maintained my composure, simply stating, "The environmental violations at Westridge speak for themselves. This isn't about family dynamics. It's about public safety and corporate accountability." Back in my car, I immediately called Patricia, who was already aware of the interview set to air that night. "We anticipated something like this," she reminded me. The best response is minimal response. Let his desperate accusations highlight his own character. She was right, of course, but watching the interview that evening was still painful. Ethan, looking appropriately somber in a crisp suit, spun a tale of family discord that contained just enough truth to be believable to those who didn't know us. Savannah always resented the close relationship I had with our father, he said, his expression a perfect mask of brotherly concern. When our grandmother left her this unexpected fortune, I was genuinely happy for her. All I asked was that she consider helping our parents in their retirement and perhaps contributing to a community foundation we were establishing. Instead, she launched this vendetta against our family business. The lies were masterfully crafted, painting him as reasonable and me as unhinged. He even produced childhood photos and old family videos showing him, including me, in activities, carefully edited moments that gave no hint of the years of condescension and dismissal that followed. The most painful moment came when my mother made a brief appearance in the segment, standing beside Ethan with a strained smile. "We just want our family whole again," she said softly. "Money should never come between loved ones." Her participation felt like the final betrayal. Despite our lunch, despite knowing the truth about Westridge, she had chosen her side. Or perhaps more accurately, she had remained on the side she'd always been on, my father's. The following days brought a barrage of messages from distant relatives and former school friends, some expressing concern, others thinly veiled judgment. The court of public opinion was now in session, and Ethan had presented his case effectively. What he hadn't counted on was Diane's journalistic thoroughness. 3 days after Ethan's interview aired, she published a follow-up piece that changed everything. In her investigation of the Westridge environmental issues, Diane had uncovered a pattern of similar violations across multiple Mitchell development projects. More significantly, she had obtained internal emails in which Ethan specifically directed staff to bury an environmental consultant's concerns about the Westridge site. "Make this go away," he had written to the company's legal counsel. "We're too far into this project to let some soil samples derail everything. Find a different lab, get different results." The timestamp on the email predated the development's groundbreaking by 6 months. There was no plausible deniability, no way to claim ignorance of the contamination. Ethan had knowingly built luxury homes on toxic land to protect his profit margins. The public reaction was swift and severe. The sympathetic narrative he had crafted collapsed overnight. The district attorney's office announced a criminal investigation into potential fraud and public endangerment charges. Investors pulled out of all Mitchell development projects, and 3 major banks froze their lines of credit. In the midst of this turmoil, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment, Mr. Abernathy, arriving unannounced with a thick folder under his arm. "I think you should see this," he said gravely after I invited him in. "It was in a sealed envelope among your grandmother's personal papers, with instructions to deliver it to you only if the family conflict escalated to a public spectacle." Inside the folder was a detailed accounting of financial transactions between my father and Ethan, dating back 15 years, along with private investigators' reports and notarized statements from former business associates. "Your grandmother suspected for years that your father was involved in questionable business dealings," Mr. Abernathy explained. "But she was particularly concerned about Ethan's escalating pattern of ethical shortcuts after he joined the company." The documents revealed a disturbing progression. What had begun as corner-cutting and regulatory avoidance had evolved into outright fraud, with Ethan at the center of increasingly problematic decisions. More shocking were records of significant funds diverted from company accounts to Ethan's personal offshore holdings, money skimmed from projects including Westridge. "She didn't just leave you the inheritance because she favored you," Mr. Abernathy said quietly. "She left it to you because she didn't trust your brother with that kind of wealth." She feared what he might become with fewer financial constraints. The revelation left me reeling. All this time, I had assumed Grandma Vivian's decision was simply about recognizing my dedication to her and my alignment with her values. I hadn't realized she had been protecting her legacy from what she knew about Ethan's character. "What should I do with this?" I asked, staring at the damning evidence. "Mr." Abernathy's expression was solemn. "That's entirely your decision. Your grandmother provided this information as a final line of defense should you need it. Whether you use it now is up to you." I spent the night reviewing every document, every transaction record, every statement. By morning, I had made my decision. These weren't just financial improprieties, they were crimes with real victims. Homeowners at risk of health problems, investors defrauded of millions, communities damaged by reckless development. With a heavy heart, I contacted Patricia and authorized her to deliver the full documentation to the district attorney's office. The legal proceedings that followed unfolded with a momentum I couldn't have anticipated. What began as an inheritance dispute and environmental investigation ballooned into one of the largest corporate fraud cases in Oregon's history. Ethan was arrested on a Tuesday morning, led from the Mitchell Development Group headquarters in handcuffs, as news cameras captured every moment. The charges were extensive fraud, embezzlement, environmental violations, and financial crimes that stretched back nearly a decade. My father, though not taken into custody that day, was named as a person of interest and subject to ongoing investigation. I watched the news coverage from the quiet of my apartment, feeling no triumph, only a profound sadness. This was my family broken beyond repair. Now their public disgrace broadcast for all to see. Yet beneath the sadness was the unmistakable sense that justice was finally being served. The victims of their corporate malfeasance would have their day in court. My phone rang incessantly. Journalists seeking comments, distant relatives choosing sides, and surprisingly, former Mitchell Development Group employees expressing gratitude for exposing practices they had felt powerless to challenge. Through it all, I maintained public silence, speaking only through Patricia's carefully worded statements, emphasizing that my actions were about corporate accountability, not family vengeance. 2 days after Ethan's arrest, my mother appeared at my door. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled. "May I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside, allowing her into the apartment we had never discussed, when she and my father insisted I needed to learn financial independence after college. I didn't know she began as she perched on the edge of my couch. "About Westridge, about the fraud. I swear to you, Savannah, I didn't know." "But you stood beside them anyway," I replied, not accusingly, just stating a fact. "In that interview, you chose a side." She looked down at her hands. "I've been choosing sides for 32 years. Always, your father's, always Ethan's. It was easier than admitting what I think I've always known, that they weren't the men I pretended they were." The honesty was startling coming from her. My mother had spent decades perfecting the art of looking away, of maintaining pleasant fictions about our family dynamics. "Mom, I never wanted any of this," I said, sitting beside her. "The inheritance, the legal battles, the criminal charges, none of it." "I know that now," she acknowledged. "My mother saw in you what I was too afraid to nurture myself: integrity, compassion, strength. I was so dependent on your father's approval that I trained myself not to see what was right in front of me." We talked for hours that afternoon, really talked perhaps for the first time in our adult lives. She revealed her own complicated relationship with Grandma Vivian, the subtle ways my father had isolated her from her own mother over the years, and her growing recognition of the patterns she had allowed to become our family's foundation. "What will you do now?" I asked, as evening fell. "I've already done it," she replied with unexpected firmness. "I've filed for divorce." And I've provided a statement to the district attorney about financial documents I found in your father's home office." Her words stunned me. After decades of acquiescence, my mother had finally found her voice. It seemed Grandma Vivian's legacy was affecting our family in ways none of us could have predicted. The legal proceedings intensified over the following weeks. Ethan remained in custody, denied bail due to flight risk concerns connected to his offshore accounts. My father, though not initially arrested, found himself increasingly entangled in the investigation, as former associates turned state's evidence to secure leniency deals. The inheritance case, meanwhile, had taken a decisive turn. With Ethan facing multiple felony charges and my father under investigation, their challenge to Grandma Vivian's will collapsed. The court ruled decisively in my favor, releasing the full trust into my control with a strongly worded judgment that emphasized the clear and unambiguous intentions of the deceased. Just as the legal victories were solidifying, the most unexpected communication arrived. A handwritten letter from Ethan sent from the detention center where he awaited trial. "Savannah," it began in his once confident handwriting, now shaky and small, "I underestimated you. All these years I thought you were the weak one, too sensitive, too principled for the real world. I was wrong. You were stronger than all of us. Strong enough to stand your ground, strong enough to do what's right despite the cost. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that somewhere beneath all this mess, I remember the brother I was supposed to be to you. I'm sorry I failed at that most basic responsibility." The letter continued with details about his gradual ethical decline, how each compromise had made the next one easier, how the pursuit of our father's approval had warped his sense of right and wrong. He acknowledged that he deserved the consequences he now faced, and asked for nothing except that I might consider maintaining contact with our mother, who he recognized had been as much a victim of our family's dysfunctional dynamics as I had been. It was signed simply "Your brother Ethan." I read the letter multiple times, searching for manipulation or hidden agendas between the lines. But for perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, Ethan's words seemed genuine, the reflection of a man finally facing the reality of choices made and paths taken. I didn't respond immediately. Some wounds were too fresh, some betrayals too profound for quick forgiveness. But I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer rather than discarding it. Perhaps someday, when justice had run its course and time had provided perspective, there might be room for a different kind of conversation between us. As summer turned to fall, the legal proceedings reached their conclusions. My father, ultimately charged with numerous financial crimes, accepted a plea deal that included significant financial restitution and a 5-year prison sentence. Ethan, facing more severe charges due to his direct involvement in the Westridge contamination cover-up, received 12 years. The Mitchell Development Group collapsed entirely, its assets liquidated, to pay restitution to defrauded investors and affected homeowners. The family name, once synonymous with success and prosperity in Portland business circles, now appeared in economics textbooks as a case study in corporate ethics failures. Through all of this, I had been quietly working with environmental experts and community advocates to establish a remediation fund for the Westridge site and other affected developments. Using a portion of my inheritance, we created a foundation dedicated to addressing the environmental damage and providing health monitoring for families who had lived in the contaminated areas. At the foundation's first public event, I finally broke my media silence with a brief statement. "The wealth my grandmother entrusted to me comes with profound responsibility, not just to manage it wisely, but to use it in ways that reflect her values of integrity, compassion, and justice." The Mitchell Foundation for Environmental Restoration isn't about making amends for actions that weren't mine. It's about acknowledging that with privilege comes the obligation to create positive change. My grandmother understood that. It's taken difficult circumstances for me to fully appreciate the depth of her wisdom. As reporters clamored with questions about my family, I simply added, "This foundation isn't about the past. It's about creating a healthier future for communities affected by environmental negligence. That's where I'd prefer to focus our attention today." Later that evening, as I returned to my apartment, now relocated to a quieter neighborhood away from the media attention, I found my mother waiting at my door with a small package. "I found this while clearing out the house," she explained as I invited her in. "I thought you should have it." Inside was a faded photograph I had never seen before, Grandma Vivian in her 30s, standing proudly beside a small art gallery storefront with Hamilton Gallery painted on the window. "Before she was a teacher, before she married your grandfather, my mother ran a small art gallery in downtown Portland," my mother explained. "It was her passion before pragmatism led her to education. She never talked about it much after it closed during the recession in the late 1970s. I stared at the image, seeing my grandmother's face alight with the same passion I felt when curating exhibitions. Another piece of our connection I had never known about. "She saw herself in you," my mother said softly. "Not just your interest in art, but your spirit, the way you value people over profit, integrity over image. I think she always knew you would use her legacy in ways that would make a real difference." As my mother left that evening, something shifted between us, not complete healing, not yet, but the beginning of a new relationship built on honesty rather than the comfortable lies that had defined our family for so long. In the quiet of my apartment, I placed Grandma Vivian's gallery photo on my mantel and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the past year, the loss, the betrayal, the legal battles, and ultimately the justice that had come at such a high personal cost. The inheritance had never been about the money. It had been about legacy values and the courage to stand for what's right, even when it means standing alone. Grandma Vivian had trusted me with more than her wealth. She had trusted me with her principles. In honoring them, I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. The Mitchell family, as I had known it, was gone forever. But from its ashes, something new and potentially better had begun to emerge. A foundation for actual good, a healthier relationship with my mother, and perhaps most importantly, the unshakable knowledge of who I was and what I stood for. As fall gave way to winter, I began making plans for an art therapy program for children affected by environmental illness, another extension of the Foundation's work, and a fitting tribute to both my grandmother's love of art and her belief in healing through creativity. The journey ahead would be challenging in different ways, but for the first time in my life, I was walking a path that felt entirely my own, free from the shadow of family expectations and empowered by the knowledge that doing the right thing, however difficult, was always worth the cost. It's been 2 years since the dust settled on what local media dubbed the Mitchell family scandal. The headlines have faded, and life has found new rhythms. The Foundation has successfully remediated 3 contaminated development sites and established health monitoring programs for over 200 affected families. The art therapy program now serves children in 5 community centers throughout Portland. I visit my father occasionally at the minimum security facility where he's serving his sentence. Our conversations are stilted, laden with unspoken regrets, but they happen small steps toward some form of reconciliation I'm not yet sure is possible. My mother has found unexpected independence returning to school to finish the degree she abandoned when she married my father and volunteering at the Foundation's community events. Ethan and I exchange letters, his reflective and increasingly thoughtful as prison provides the one thing his privileged life never did, time to consider the consequences of his choices. I don't know if we'll ever rebuild what was broken between us, but the honest communication feels like something worth preserving. As for me, Grandma Vivian's gallery photograph inspired me to open a small exhibition space adjacent to the foundation offices, a place showcasing art that addresses environmental themes and community resilience. It feels like completing a circle she began decades ago. The inheritance that caused such turmoil has been largely dedicated to the Foundation's work, with portions set aside for educational initiatives and arts funding. Money, I've learned, is neither inherently good nor evil, it simply amplifies who we already are. So, what did you think of my family's journey through betrayal, justice, and ultimate redemption? Has your family ever experienced conflicts over money or inheritance that tested relationships? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or offered any perspective on family dynamics, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories with powerful lessons. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when it's difficult. Thank you all for listening. And remember, sometimes the families we build through honesty and shared values are stronger than the ones we're born into. Until next time.